Afternoon and welcome to, I suppose, about 20 minutes of where have we been, where are we going sort of thing. And I was going to try, if you'll bear with me, to actually talk and use technology. Will that be all right? Try and do a bit of both. Does that seem okay? And if I could have the slide up, please. I was maybe going to use a bit of PowerPoint, and we've got a little twit feed going there. Whenever I get down in life, or whenever I get a little bit a little bit sad, I suppose, I wander over to eBay and I have a look at my positive feedback record. Does anybody else do that? Or is it just me? Oh, just me then. Oh no, there's 2 or 3 of us, good. I don't feel so lonely now. I don't want to brag or anything, but I happen to have a sort of 100% positive feedback record on eBay. It just sort of cheers me up. And then it got me thinking that it made me happy, but then it made me sad in sort of equal measures, like life often does. Because it made me think, yeah, it's a good thing, but how come once I'd used eBay once, I'd received more formative feedback and assessment than I had in 14 years formal education? I had a place where I could go and get some feedback as to how I was doing. And so my talk this afternoon I wanted to call World of Difference, and innovation and creativity in that world of difference. You guys make that difference for learners, I think, but we've also got to face up to the fact that we are intrinsically different and unique individuals, and it's how we accommodate that, how we acknowledge that, that really allows us to move forward with these tools. That's my argument, that's where I'm going. And I thought between here and 20 minutes, wouldn't it be nice if we made a school? Is that all right with everyone, if we sort of make a school, you know, build the curriculum and share it? And I don't want this school to last forever. I'm going to call it Twit School. And I want it to last for, say, 100 hours. Sound okay? I think we get a bit too hung up on permanence, don't we? And yet learning is a sort of transitory, you know, wonderful thing. So we're going for impermanence here. Sound okay? And those of you that are logged in, help me with the name here. What's it called? Something memorable like conference call or organizer or... Connect, Conference Connect. In there I've put some resources. I think there's actually a resource in there saying do not click. But you can also get to it by going bit.ly, I did well. I only realised recently you can customise your little names in bit.ly. And I call that a hyperlink. I always use a West Country accent for things that are blue and underlined. I think it's a useful way of taking the stress out of some learning situations. Different regional accents for new technical capability. Just to sort of lower the threat. It got me into trouble in Bristol recently, but you know, I recommend it. Yeah? And what I wanted to sort of do was, well, if I click on that hyperlink, it should open that web link. And I've only just learned how to do this, but I thought, wouldn't it be lovely to get a snapshot of capability in the room, build our own school? If you click on that link, it will take you there. You put your name in, you put something that you did well, that you're prepared to spend 140 characters helping someone else to do, and that will generate a spreadsheet. It takes about 5 minutes to do this in Google Docs. You go into sort of the spreadsheet and you say, yeah, make me a form, and there it is. Wouldn't it be nice that in sort of half an hour we might have 50 class members, 50 school members, this ephemeral Twit School, the school of 100 hours. Yeah, we might bring it back occasionally. And you just fill that form in. I'll leave you to do that. And then it made me sort of think, yeah, what else? Well, I thought, yeah, I have a problem with Bloom's taxonomy. It's just a bit too big for me, you know, all those sort of stages. I thought, wouldn't it be nice if we could just simplify it? And I thought, maybe we can. We can say sort of, you just have to know, you get to know something. Later on, you get to show what you know. And then later on, you start to grow it. There's a 4-stage called flow when you do it in unconscious competence, but I'm not talking about that yet. And I was going to use that as a sort of structure. And I thought it'd be worthwhile, now that I know I've got about 20 minutes left, I ought to sort of jump out of PowerPoint and run. I've built a little piece of software called the Learning Score that allows me to sort of hopefully say what I'm going to do in this session. I thought I was going to talk for about that long. Yeah, that seemed about right. what you're able to do is just sort of lay out a learning event in time. I was thinking about the fact that we had a music score for music, but we've got no way of choreographing that strange interplay when we gather together to sort of try and learn something. So what do people think if I was to sort of talk for about that long? Be about right? And then I thought we could crowdsource a font. Would that be all right from the wonderful sort of website? What's it called? Fontcapture.com. Pass these around. And what you've got to do is just write a letter in there and then pass it on. And we're going to be typing at the end of this session, hopefully, in a font that's been sourced from this room. Would that be all right? Yeah. Ought to pass one a bit further back. If we pass that back about 6 tables and then start passing it round. So I thought we'd crowdsource a font. And at the moment, has anybody taken part in that Twit school yet? Show of hands, has anybody said something they're good at? Look at that, there's about 40 people in here have already contributed to that school. Fantastic. Never tried it before. It's my premiere. So that's where we're going. We'll crowdsource a font. At some point, we're going to stop and you're going to turn to the person next to you and say, wow, you're different. So just sort of, get your aim now. So that's coming in this sort of session. And what am I going to talk about? Well, I'm going to talk about there's the map of it. I'm going to talk about difference. I'm going to spell it properly when I do. You're going to turn to the person and say, wow, you're different. We're going to work the active-passive axis. We're going to look at the age of adhocracy. And we're going to celebrate our individual learning curves, because that may be where the gold is buried. And later on, I've made a link to the sort of, website, the school we built. Oh, wow. And look, that school is already growing. That school is growing because we've connected to the ultimate resource of another person. And that's quite powerful, isn't it? So it's not enough to say we've got these tools. It's not enough to say that one person has the answer. But I ought to start this playing now to keep myself on time. So if I click the sort of, playhead, that inexorable sort of red line will start to move across the screen, and hopefully keep me on time and on task. And the search that I've got running there is on TweetDeck, and I think the sad thing is we live in a world at the moment where shopping is more important than learning. Now, if we go to Amazon, we buy one book. We're about to leave the site, and what happens? Across the bottom of the screen flits people who bought this book were also interested in. The wisdom of the database is deployed to help us spend more. And we need to sort of kick down some of the traces, and we need to say we need those tools in the classroom. I want a student who's just finishing the right-angled triangle, when across his mobile device flits people who looked at the right-angled triangle were also interested in the hypotenuse. Shall I take you there? So that's where we're going. Time's running out for me. Shopping is still more important than learning, but you've had a massive skewing effect today. Normally, shopping outperforms learning 3-to-1 on Twitter around the world. Today, learning has overtaken on 3 occasions, probably down to the amount of learning that's been tweeted as a text, maybe not as an event. So maybe another slide. I always should say, really, with PowerPoint, how long do you want me to PowerPoint you for before I do my score? Yeah. Anybody start me on 5 minutes? Half the learners in the room would be happier if I said, PowerPoint, where do you fancy? And we could go A, B, C, D, and you could say A4, please, John. Just once in a very blue moon, learners getting the chance to get it differently, rather than what I'm doing now, the talk and listen mode. Makes a huge difference. A lovely phrase from Barbara Prashnig. It's in my notes saying, the acknowledged need tends to diminish. How do we acknowledge the need? How do we acknowledge difference? That's where I want to go. Let's go there. Some of you will prefer the fact that I've done a little Wordle of my presentation. I hadn't realized, of course, that mentions are coming up as well. That's distracting. I wasn't expecting that. How many people prefer that? That's what I'm going to talk about. And we could leave early. A good definition of a curriculum is many paths to the same destination. I'm not sure we've explored powerfully enough yet how many different paths we've got available to us. I'm worried that history is going to judge us harshly. I'm worried history is going to say, They had what tools? They did what with them? And I suppose that's the wake-up call for me to say, how do we democratize it? How do we? I mean, we've got the font source going on now. Sometimes I hand out the Guardian crossword as well, as an example of a Web 2 tool. Where we'll do the quick crossword in the Guardian. Just pass it round, and everyone gets 30 seconds. And if you're the person who completes it, you say, we have tapped in to the unlimited potential of each other in a Web 2 kind of way. Will that be all right? I feel guilty starting it here. But really, if we could sort of keep passing it back till it's up the top, and we'll start it from the back to the front, maybe, if that's all right. That's probably a big ask, I know. So many different ways to the same destination. And interesting, isn't it, when we got one computer, we should have called it the unique machine. There was one of them. It was 7 tons of brass and steel. We called it the difference engine. And what we have done, in fact, is we have unleashed the difference engine. But when we first got it, we thought about computers and rooms for them and names. And we should have been thinking tools and activities and risk and connection. And have we made enough difference? Or have we just got to where we were, but very quickly? I call it the idiot vitesse. You know? Sometimes I find that I haven't really learned anything, but I've occupied myself very much for a long period of time. It's a bit like the triumph vitesse. Anyone remember that? Yeah. An idiot, of course, nice, the etymology of that word. It means a private person. And perhaps that's one of the challenges. How do we acknowledge that? And sometimes I do a little test at this point for my audience. I say, someone's buttered some toast for you. You'd rather it hadn't happened, but it has. Does it matter? Does it matter the degree of melt, the amount of coverage, appearance, and behavior of the final artifact? And if it does, in a moment, I want you to point to that side of the room. I better switch the camera on my iPhone now, because I'll be taking a picture in 5 minutes. And in a moment, when the tweet deck clears, I want you to sort of point in that direction if you are really quite bothered about how your toast is buttered. And I wanted you to point for long enough for me to take a picture and for other people to look around and say, oh, that's interesting. Would people like to point now? I promise not to put any captions underneath. And what I want to say at this point is, wow, what a difference. It is time we acknowledged it. It's time we deployed the tools with that acknowledgement in mind. People pointing in this direction, I'm going to say, sorry, I've been a bit off the wall. I'm trying to be more linear. You can write in pen or pencil and follow the map with your finger if you've been lucky enough to get one of the folded notes. The virtual one is on the resource. And yes, this is a Tuesday. And people pointing in this direction, I was going to say, yeah, we'll do all of that, we said to the other group. But we'll also have some fun exploring. We'll take the odd hyperlink. You can trace around your phone on a piece of paper. If your phone is bigger than the piece of paper, you're at the wrong conference. And there'll be a talking sheep soon. So what do we know? Well, what we know is that difference is where it's at. We've got to acknowledge it. We jump straight into personalization, as if it was something easy and fatuous. And what we really should have done, perhaps, is take a step back and say, let's just acknowledge difference. Let's just acknowledge the fact that all the keynotes that spoke today got their massive learning informally outside the education system. Let's just acknowledge that there's massive redundancy in lessons that mean that after I've had several hundred hours, I get a C, a D, or an E. Let's acknowledge that, and let's start putting the tools in around that fact. Acknowledge difference. And we've got to work on that active-passive axis. It's the only filter, I think, that fits with difference, really. How active are we in our learning opportunities? How many people get out the Playmobil every so often? Feel a town development, or a digestion movie coming on in the cardboard box in the corner of the classroom that's been renamed the film studio. We can learn from politicians. Spin. How many people do that? Show of hands. Quite a few. How many people use that wonderful tool, Scratch, allows students to take apart resources built by other students? Quite a few. Wonderful. 160,000 projects around the world. I call it struggleware. Software that a bit like Flash that makes students scratch their heads, a bit like HyperCard used to be. Strange old man talk came upon me. We need more struggleware. We need tools that make students stop, shake their heads, get a little bit angry, and build something that's going to be valued, that's going to move them down this end of their active-passive axis. How many people get out the microphone? Feel a podcast coming on if someone's been nasty to them? Quite a few. How many people have made an episode of Scrubs? Oh, nobody. One day the producer is going to be in the audience. How many people have published something on YouTube? Wow, massive. How many people are on Twitter? Oh, that'll be everyone then. How many people have written an application for the Nintendo DS? 2 or 3. How many people have published something on Wikipedia? Wow. Leave Facebook, I'm off it at the moment. What we need to do gets clearer if we filter it like this. As the media industry in its current death throes, what it wants us to be is very savvy passives, very savvy consumers. It wants us to be able to follow 8 or 9 parallel storylines in an episode of Sopranos, but it doesn't really want us making anything. And we know intuitively and from our own empirical experience, learning is massively in the doing. All of the keynotes that have spoken before today, how did they learn? Massively in doing, massively through life experience. Our job's simple. We've just got to push students down this end of their active-passive axis. We've got to make them makers rather than consumers if we want to open up and acknowledge the different paths that they're going to take in their learning, I think. And what does that mean? Well, I suppose it means that sort of learners aren't as important as shoppers yet, but we have permission. If anyone, sometimes I scroll all the audience names at the start and I say, if your name comes up, you know, say what learning is, and everyone gets a bit terrified, you know, even though they know. My favourite definition of learning is from Gordon Wells. Learning is the guided reinvention of knowledge. That means every generation gets passed the torch. Every generation gets the opportunity to explore how they can make it as powerful and as enduring for the generation that they're to teach. That's why we have the opportunity, that's why we have the responsibility to chase those endorphins of enthusiasm. That's why the wonderful work we've seen going on in schools with resources in the last 2 days, you know, works in that area. And I'll come back to some of those points later. And I suppose we can also think about the sensory matrix. 4 pathways to come to know something. But perhaps what I'm doing now, apart from the fact that you're making a font, apart from the fact that you're building a school, all you're doing is sitting there listening to me. And there's tremendous redundancy in that. And with many learners, there's huge redundancy because someone's talking and someone's showing. And the technology has perhaps made that worse. And we need to unpack that and understand that before we go further. And really, it's as if that's the postage stamp on the envelope of learning. And we live our life on the postage stamp of see and hear, and we know that the technology has to work. We know that the Latin reminds us one learns in teaching. 50, 60 people have now contributed to a new school that didn't exist 20 minutes ago. And my favourite phrase at the moment, solvitur ambulando. It is solved by walking. And wonderful tools like GPS Mission, free for most mobile devices, allow you to plan activities in the outside, outdoor learning adventures. That we have the opportunity to get around there, to walk that whole envelope. It made me develop a tool that things were going so well and now I've got an error message. I've paid to have this translated. It's from Microsoft and it says you're about to open some software that we didn't make. Are you sure you want to do that? On this occasion I am. And that's the tricky world that we walk now, a tricky path that we walk, isn't it, sort of, between monopolies, vested interests, open source, and no one said it was going to be easy in the age of adhocracy. And what I do is I sort of just generate sort of Every time I click it, it generates an event at random. If you want your own copy of this with editable lefts and rights, send it to me. It's appearing live now for the first time, sort of, with an assessment corner. On this occasion, you've got to do what we know about India as a storyboard, but what you've also got to be thinking about is how you'll explain this to someone who's absent. Yeah? It's sort of, it's a tool that I built it really as a nudge tool. Nudges us around that whole envelope of learning. In fact, I got so carried away with it, I thought, wouldn't it be nice to have it on the iPhone? I'm not sure if we can get this on the sort of camera. It'd be good fun if we could. On the iPhone here, if I sort of, it's called the RAG. I might have put a link in there. And what I built this for, really, was to hopefully return lesson planning to where it belongs, the corridor on the way to the classroom. And it goes a bit like this. You sort of walk along the corridor and you check for senior management, even if it's you. And then you take out your phone and you give it a shake. Should be a bit of sound on that if I haven't. And it says, do things that conduct electricity as a proverb. And there are some green little hyperlinks to take you to explanations of the two. Now, I'm not sure if you shook that twice and you've got one that walked you one way in the envelope of doing and one that walked you in the other part of the envelope of talking. You might have had more engagement with Heisenberg's uncertainty principle than just writing about it. Or actually looking at some curriculum. And if you don't like that one, of course, you just shake again. It's the only confession, really, of the afternoon, I suppose, I was going to make. For the last sort of 10, 15, maybe 40 years, I've kept a notebook in my back pocket. And anything I find useful, links, resources, I sort of write them down. And then I was going through an airport and I saw that they scanned my notebook in less than a second. So I went home and I Googled... we need to try and come tight on this. I'll try and not shake it around too much, but just to see if it works. It may not. I Googled passport scanner. And what I was able to do with the passport scanner was to scan all my notes, 5 years of my life, in about 2 hours. I even scanned the covers because they had strange names like In the Bleak Midwinter, 07. And I'm not sure if we can see that now, but I'm actually able to sort of, I've put myself on a finger swiping course. Finger swiping course, and an unpinch course, and a pinch course. I hope it's not a rude page that we're starting to zoom in on. And my notebooks lived again. And then, of course, the question was, as I zoomed in on them, I could actually read particular words and revisit. And the question for us all really is, do you want your students to live in that world or in that world? And for me, and for you, I'm sure, the answer gets simple. We want them to live powerfully in both. And just as we need to move students down the active end of their active-passive axis, we also need to allocate resources at the point where these two worlds meet. You know? I want beautiful hand-drawn, handwritten fonts, perhaps, beautiful artwork in the wonderful Canvas project in Scotland, beginning with the human hand, getting taken further and celebrated through the tools of our time. Living powerfully in both worlds perhaps has to be where we put our resources. Thinking about that, it got me thinking, perhaps questions are in the future, answers are in the past. Everyone looks too young apart from me to remember the Banda Spirit Master. Yeah. Our first multi-sensory worksheet, good. Getting some feedback from the back there. You could sniff as you read. Yeah? If you had a difficult class, you'd write small. So they had to hold it close to their noses. And then you'd say, put your head down on the floor and have a little nap. Table, sorry. And blow me, the research just comes in. Best way of moving memory from short to long term is what? Yeah, having a little nap. Google have installed napping stations. And there's the photocopier. Everyone talks a good cloud, but in most secondary schools in England, they copy 2 million pages a year. I've animated that. It's 3.5 Nelson's columns, 3.5 Statues of Liberty. I've taken the American file with me by mistake. They're the same height if you take the plinths out of it. Yeah. 3.5, if you stacked up the reams, one on top of another, we copy 3.5 Nelson's columns a year in every school. And part of the reason for that is we keep our eyes firmly fixed on the horizon and the cloud or whatever else is coming, and we ignore the here and now. And quite often I think, what about CD-ROM? I could put everything on there. I could wander out into the playground, checking for students. Yeah? And then I could sidle up to a group, not look at them directly, and say, "Psst, don't look. Do you want to buy a curriculum? 10p. Yeah? And what could I have on there? I could have work that students had done, scanned, audio interviews, reflections of students, how they do things differently. They came back, interviews with parents. I could have everything on there for 10 pence. And we tend to ignore it and keep photocopying. And perhaps it's time to take the eyes off the horizon and make the most of the here and now. I suppose we need to show how keep learning active. If we want 2 points that make the difference for learners, research tells us, and the links are there, I'll come back to it. Keeping learning active, providing good formative feedback makes the difference. 50 million students were looked at, meta-level research, John Hattie, New Zealand, inexorable. The 2 things that make a difference. We've got to innovate our own curriculum. I think there probably won't be time to look at the resources. 2 minutes? Yeah. Done in a very polite way, if I may say so. Yeah. But we've got amazing tools too, like Twitter. Look at this. Here's Twitter on a sort of Saturday afternoon before the Home Internationals began in February. It's carrying out more professional development than your average learning authority. Down the bottom here, someone's missed something. They said, has anybody got a link to what was recorded last night, what I missed? Someone else says, there's the link. Someone else has lost their file because their machine has crashed, but he knows other people have got it open around the world. He's treating the world as his hard disk. Someone else is saying, look, I've put this up, tell me what you think. Someone else says, oh, I'm not sure about that. And someone else says, oh, seen the way Apple are advertising their new... And someone at the end says, hey, I've done all these films, here they are. So we've got wonderful tools. And I suppose I've got to, so as I finish, too much... I'll publish the rest, but we need to allocate our resources at the point where these worlds meet. And with that, I suppose I ought to sort of move into sort of things to grow, your own learning curve. Everyone else, I suppose, will tell you it's about the technology. It's not. You know that for yourselves. The technology moves upwards as a straight line. You've done something far more profound. You've all had your own individual learning curves, and you must jealously protect those, because at some point, a learning curve will always do for a straight line. And I wanted to leave you with the thought of it's celebrating and sharing our individual learning curves that makes us powerful, gives us the opportunities. And S&N there isn't time for today. If we were to sort of translate the government, it's time for telling stories and making things. How do these tools help us share? And resources, the Learning Score is there, but if anyone wants a generator, email me there. I'll be down at the tribal stand around 4 o'clock if anyone wanted to buy a book. It's on special offer today. And to finish, wouldn't it be nice just to see how many tools? So it's bit.ly. If we want to see where we are now, www.bit.ly/tweetschool. Twit School, did I say? I've forgotten now. Takes us to what's been created while I've been warbling on. Wow, we've only gone and built a school. Thank you very much. I'll finish there. Well done you. Great.